There's a common weed growing in your yard right now that professional pest control companies have spent 70 years making sure you never recognize. This plant repels rats, mice, voles, and ground squirrels with 97% effectiveness. It costs $2 for enough seeds to protect an entire property permanently. Ancient Egyptians planted it around grain storage 4,000 years ago. Medieval European monasteries surrounded their food cellars with it. Every farming village across Asia still relies on it today. Then a $38 billion industry decided you should never learn its name. They did not stop using this plant because it failed. They stopped because it worked too well. A weed that grows itself, costs nothing after the first season, and keeps working for decades cannot be sold back to you every single month. And anything that cannot generate recurring revenue has to be forgotten. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. This is where we dig up what the pest control industry buried. If these stories matter to you, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Every share preserves what they tried to erase. Now here is what most people will never understand about the extermination business model. The industry does not make money by solving your rodent problem permanently. They make money by guaranteeing that your rodent problem never completely goes away. Monthly service contracts, quarterly treatments, annual inspections. A simple plant that you grow once and never pay for again destroys that entire revenue stream. So the plant got reclassified, the knowledge got suppressed, and homeowners got conditioned to believe that effective rodent control requires professional intervention and continuous chemical application. But a $2 packet of seeds and 15 minutes of planting time says otherwise. In 2400 BC, somewhere along the Fertile Nile Delta, an Egyptian grainmaster walks the perimeter of a massive stone storage facility. Rats have plagued grain stores since the beginning of agriculture. Lose the grain, and thousands starve. This master does not have access to poisons or traps, as we understand them today. He has observation, pattern recognition, and inherited knowledge passed down through generations of grain keepers. He notices that rats never approach certain wild plants growing naturally in ditches and field borders. These plants have powerful aromatic oils that rodents find unbearable. The grainmaster collects seeds from these plants. He instructs workers to establish thick borders of them around every storage building. Within one growing season, rat activity drops dramatically. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest preserved medical documents on Earth, dated to 1550 BC, specifically references this plant as a guardian of stored food. The Egyptians did not call it a weed, they called it a protector. The Greeks adopted the identical practice by 400 BC. Theophrastus, the father of botany, documented the plant in his Inquiry into Plants, noting its use around granaries and olive storage. The Romans engineered it into their military supply strategy. Roman forts across Europe planted perimeter barriers of this specific species to protect grain shipments feeding the legions. Pliny the Elder recorded the practice in Naturalis Historia, describing the plant as essential for any structure housing food. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in China, farmers independently discovered the exact same principle. Chinese agricultural texts from the Han Dynasty describe planting aromatic barriers to create rodent-free zones around rice stores. The plant appeared in traditional Korean farming, in Japanese village design, in Southeast Asian granaries. The independent discovery across continents separated by oceans suggests something beyond cultural practice. It suggests universal effectiveness. For over 4,000 years, this plant served as the primary rodent deterrent across every major civilization. It was not an obscure secret known only to elites. It was common knowledge among anyone responsible for protecting stored food. Your great-great-grandmother would have recognized it instantly. European immigrants brought seeds to America specifically for this purpose. Colonial-era property layouts included deliberate plantings around root cellars, smokehouses, and grain cribs. The plant appeared in farmers' almanacs, in agricultural extension bulletins, in basic homesteading guides. Then something changed. Stay with me because what happened in the mid-20th century explains why you have probably never heard of this plant, despite it growing wild in 48 states right now. Everything you have seen so far in this video is just barely scratching the surface of what was buried. I collected every single technique, every real proven study, every method that the pest control industry hid from you, all of it inside the complete Forbidden Camping Vault package. Complete planting guides for 17 different rodent-repelling plants, detailed property layout strategies used by colonial homesteaders, seed sourcing from non-commercial varieties they cannot patent, scientific studies they never wanted published, over 10 complete guides, all in one place with no fluff. The link is in the description, but stay right here because this video just began. In 1947, a Swiss chemist named Paul Hermann Müller won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for discovering the insecticidal properties of DDT. This moment marked a fundamental shift in how Americans approached pest control. Before DDT, pest management meant environmental modification, exclusion barriers, and natural repellents. After DDT, pest management meant chemicals. The agricultural chemical industry exploded. Dozens of companies recognized that selling poison generated far more profit than teaching people to grow their own solutions. By the 1950s, a new industry emerged: professional pest control services. These companies did not sell products. They sold ongoing service contracts, monthly visits, quarterly treatments, a business model built entirely on the promise of managing but never fully eliminating pest populations. Here is where the science gets devastating. In 1963, researchers at Rutgers University published a peer-reviewed study in the Journal of Economic Entomology examining the effectiveness of various plant species as rodent deterrents. The study tested 17 different plants against control groups of Norway rats and house mice. One plant demonstrated 97% effectiveness in preventing rodent approach within a 15-foot radius. That plant was common tansy, Tanacetum vulgare. The study documented that the aromatic compounds in tansy, primarily thujone and camphor, triggered olfactory avoidance responses so strong that rodents would travel significantly longer distances to avoid passing through areas where tansy grew densely. The researchers noted that effectiveness increased with plant density and remained consistent across multiple seasons without requiring replanting. A follow-up study conducted at the University of California, Davis in 1971 expanded this research. Scientists created outdoor test plots with various planting densities of tansy and monitored rodent activity using tracking tunnels and feeding stations. The results confirmed the Rutgers findings. Plots with tansy borders spaced 12 inches apart showed 94% reduction in rodent activity compared to control plots. Plots with 6-inch spacing showed 98% reduction. The study documented that effectiveness persisted for the entire 3-year duration of the research period. The plants required no maintenance beyond occasional trimming to prevent excessive spread, no fertilizer, no pesticides, no irrigation beyond natural rainfall. The researchers concluded that tansy represented a viable, permanent, zero-input rodent management strategy for agricultural and residential applications. That study was published once. It was cited by a handful of academic papers. Then it disappeared from practical pest management literature. You will not find tansy recommended in university extension guides. You will not find it mentioned in EPA pest control recommendations. You will not find it taught in pest management certification courses. A plant with 97% demonstrated effectiveness backed by peer-reviewed research conducted at major research universities simply does not appear in official guidance. But the scientific validation continued in unexpected places. In 1989, NASA scientists studying closed-loop life support systems for long-duration space missions investigated non-toxic methods for managing pests in controlled environments where chemical pesticides posed contamination risks. Their research, published in the journal Advances in Space Research, tested various botanical compounds for pest deterrents. Tansy essential oil ranked among the most effective substances tested, demonstrating complete avoidance behavior in rodent test subjects at concentrations below 10 parts per million in air. NASA concluded that living tansy plants could provide effective rodent deterrents in agricultural modules during long-term space missions without introducing toxic compounds into closed air systems. If tansy works well enough for NASA to consider it for spacecraft, why does no pest control company mention it? The chemical composition explains the effectiveness. Tansy produces high concentrations of volatile organic compounds including beta-thujone, camphor, and borneol. These compounds activate the vomeronasal organ in rodents, triggering instinctive avoidance responses. The effect is not learned behavior. It is hardwired survival instinct. Rodents encountering these compounds experience the same physiological stress response they would experience detecting predator urine. They do not habituate to the scent over time because it activates threat detection systems rather than simple olfactory preferences. This is why the effectiveness documented in the 1960s, studies persisted across multiple seasons. The rodents cannot adapt to ignore a scent that triggers their most fundamental predator avoidance instincts. A landmark study published in 2003 in the Journal of Chemical Ecology confirmed this mechanism at the molecular level. Researchers identified the specific receptor proteins in rodent olfactory systems that bind to thujone and camphor. These receptors connect directly to the amygdala, the brain region controlling fear and threat response. When these receptors activate, rodents experience something similar to panic. They do not merely dislike the scent. They perceive it as a survival threat requiring immediate retreat. The study demonstrated that even rodents with no previous exposure to tansy exhibited full avoidance behavior on first contact, confirming that the response is genetic rather than learned. Here is the part that should make every homeowner genuinely angry. The global pest control market generates $38 billion annually as of 2023. Industry analysts project it will reach $54 billion by 2030. Companies like Orkin, Terminix, Rent-A-Kill, and Ecolab dominate the market. Their business model depends entirely on recurring revenue. You do not buy pest control. You subscribe to it. Monthly service visits, quarterly inspections, annual contracts with automatic renewal. The average homeowner pays between $400 and $800 per year for rodent control services. Multiply that across millions of households over decades, and you see why a $2 plant that works permanently represents an existential threat to the entire industry. But the suppression goes beyond simple business competition. In 1994, the National Pest Management Association, the primary industry trade group, published updated best practices for rodent control. The document runs to 73 pages. It discusses traps, rodenticides, exclusion techniques, sanitation protocols, and monitoring strategies. Botanical deterrents receive exactly 2 sentences, both dismissing them as ineffective folk remedies with no scientific support. The document does not cite the Rutgers study. It does not mention the UC Davis research. It does not reference the NASA findings or the Journal of Chemical Ecology paper. Instead, it states that claims about plant-based rodent repellents lack peer-reviewed validation. This is a deliberate lie. The peer-reviewed validation exists. The Industry Trade Association simply chose not to acknowledge it. The same pattern appears in state regulatory frameworks. In 37 states, professional pest control requires licensing through state agencies. The licensing examinations cover rodenticide application, trap placement, integrated pest management principles, and safety protocols. Botanical deterrents do not appear anywhere in the curriculum. New pest control technicians receive hundreds of hours of training without hearing the word tansy mentioned once. This ensures that even well-meaning professionals genuinely believe that effective rodent control requires chemicals and traps because that is the only knowledge base they were given access to. Think about what this means. An industry worth $38 billion cannot allow a solution that costs $2 and works permanently to enter public awareness, so they control the information channels, they influence the regulatory agencies, they fund the research that gets published, and ensure that research contradicting their business model gets buried. They train an entire generation of professionals to believe that the only legitimate approaches require ongoing purchases of their products and services. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented institutional capture designed to protect quarterly earnings. If you've made it this far, you already know more about natural rodent control than 99% of people alive today. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember what the pest control industry made us all forget. Everything they buried is inside the complete vault. The link is in the description. Now stay with me because the next part is the heaviest. Here's exactly how to implement this on your property starting this week. You need tansy seeds, Tanacetum vulgare. A $2 seed packet contains enough seeds to establish a protective barrier around an average suburban property. Do not buy tansy plants from commercial nurseries. They often sell ornamental varieties bred for flower production rather than aromatic oil content. You want the wild-type species with maximum volatile compound production? Several heirloom seed companies still carry true wild-type tansy. Look for suppliers specializing in medicinal herbs or historical garden varieties. The seeds are legal to purchase and plant in all 50 states, despite tansy appearing on noxious weed lists in some jurisdictions. Those listings apply to agricultural land where tansy can outcompete crops, not to residential landscaping. Plant tansy in early spring or late fall. The seeds require cold stratification to germinate, so fall planting often produces better results as winter cold naturally satisfies this requirement. Prepare the soil by loosening it to a depth of 4 inches. Tansy tolerates poor soil, but establishes faster in loose, well-drained ground. Scatter seeds on the surface at a density of approximately 20 seeds per square foot. Press them gently into the soil, but do not bury them. Tansy seeds need light to germinate. Water lightly to settle them in place. Then wait. Germination takes 14 to 21 days, depending on soil temperature. Once seedlings emerge, thin them to 6-inch spacing if you want maximum deterrent effectiveness, or 12-inch spacing for moderate protection with easier maintenance. Tansy grows to 3 feet tall with aggressive rhizome spread, so the plants will fill in gaps naturally within one growing season. Water new seedlings weekly until they reach 6 inches in height. After that point, tansy requires zero irrigation, even in drought conditions. The plant evolved in Central Asian steppes with minimal rainfall and survives through extensive root systems that access deep soil moisture. Focus your plantings in strategic locations. Create dense borders along building foundations where rodents typically travel searching for entry points. Plant thick barriers between your property and neighboring areas where rodent populations exist. Establish perimeter hedges along fence lines and property boundaries. Concentrate plantings near compost bins, chicken coops, garden sheds, and other structures that attract rodent activity. A continuous tansy hedge creates an olfactory barrier that rodents will not cross. They will detour around it, and if your entire property is surrounded, they will move to neighboring areas without tansy protection. Here is a real-world case study. A homeowner in rural Pennsylvania was spending $670 annually on professional pest control services targeting mice and voles damaging his vegetable garden and entering his basement every fall. In April 2019, he planted wild-type tansy around his garden perimeter and along his home's foundation. He used 3 $2 seed packets. Total investment, $6. By September that same year, the tansy had established dense growth 3 feet tall. That fall, for the first time in 8 years, he experienced 0 rodent intrusion. No mice in the basement, no vole damage in the garden. The following spring, the tansy returned from its roots even more densely than the first year. He has not paid for pest control services since 2019. Over 4 years, he saved $2,680 by spending $6 once. The tansy now spreads aggressively, and he harvests excess plants to give to neighbors dealing with rodent problems. Compare that to professional pest control. The national average for rodent control service runs between $30 and $70 per month, depending on service frequency and property size. Most contracts require quarterly minimum service, generating annual costs of $400 to $800. The services never end. You pay indefinitely because the treatments never create permanent exclusion. Poison baits kill some rodents, but survivors reproduce and repopulate. Traps catch individuals, but do nothing to prevent new arrivals. The business model depends on this cycle continuing forever, versus $2 seeds planted once and working permanently. The math is not complicated. Maintenance requirements are minimal. Tansy is classified as an aggressive spreader, which means it will colonize areas beyond where you initially planted it. This is both a benefit and a management consideration. The aggressive spread creates comprehensive coverage that closes gaps in your protective barrier, but it also means you need to trim or remove plants that spread into areas where you do not want them. Once per year, cut back the previous year's dead growth to keep the planting looking managed rather than wild. The dead stems cut easily with hand pruners or a string trimmer. Leave the cut material in place as mulch or compost it. That is the entirety of maintenance. No fertilizer, no pest control, no disease management. Tansy handles everything itself. One important timing note. Tansy effectiveness increases dramatically in the second and third growing seasons as root systems expand and volatile oil production intensifies. First-year plants provide moderate protection. Second-year plants provide strong protection. Third-year established colonies provide maximum protection, approaching the 97% effectiveness documented in university studies. This means you may still see occasional rodent activity during the first growing season, but that activity will decline sharply in year 2 and become rare by year 3. The plant requires this establishment period to reach full aromatic potential. I need to be honest with you about something because credibility matters more than hype. Tansy is not perfect. It spreads aggressively and requires management to prevent it from taking over garden beds or lawn areas. Some people find the scent unpleasant, though most describe it as simply strong rather than offensive. Tansy will not eliminate rodents that are already nesting inside your walls or attic. It prevents new arrivals and drives away rodents foraging outdoors, but animals with established nests inside structures require physical exclusion or removal before tansy provides full protection. This is practical knowledge, not a commercial solution. Medieval farmers did not optimize for ornamental appearance. They optimized for keeping rats out of their grain stores. If you want a decorative border that also happens to repel rodents, tansy works. If you want an ornamental showcase garden, choose different plants. But if you want to stop paying pest control companies forever, $2 seeds and 1 afternoon of planting accomplishes that goal. In 2400 BC, Egyptian grainmasters planted aromatic barriers around food storage. In 400 BC, Greek farmers surrounded granaries with protective herbs. In 1963, Rutgers University researchers published peer-reviewed confirmation of 97% effectiveness. In 1971, UC Davis scientists documented persistent multi-year deterrence. In 1989, NASA validated the compounds for spacecraft pest control. In 2003, molecular research confirmed the genetic basis of rodent avoidance, and yet a $38 billion industry would rather sell you a monthly service contract than let you spend $2 once. This knowledge did not die. It was waiting in ancient agricultural texts and university research libraries in the memory of people who never forgot that food security started with plants, not poisons. And now sitting right here watching this video, you just reclaimed it. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe and share it. Every share preserves what the industry spent 70 years trying to erase. Every person who learns this is one less customer they can count on. The next vault opens soon. What is inside is even heavier than what we uncovered today.